Hello everyone and welcome to my Friday sermon. I'm so organised today, I'm doing it on Thursday. I'm very, very proud of myself. Obviously, really, it's the Shabbat sermon for this week. It will be available, of course, tomorrow, Friday as well. Hope you all had a good week. We'll start, as we always do, with some prayers for those who are unwell and for our situation generally. Page 510 in the Green Singers, Psalm 121, SI9. Shir Amalis Esoenai El Harim Me'ayin Yava Esri Me'yim Adainai Oiser Shamayim Boretz Al Yitein Lamoi Draglecha Al Yamu Shoym recha, hinei lo yanov la yishan, shoym Yisroel, Adonai shoym recha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yaminecha, yoymam hashemesh lo yakeka, ve'yoreyach b'loylo. Adonai yishmorecha, mikol ra yishmor es nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzeicha v'yecha, me'ata b'yad oilom. A song of ascent, I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? It comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot stumble. He who guards you does not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord is your guardian and your shade at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all harm. He will guard your life. He will guard your going and coming, now and forevermore. We'll say prayers to those who are unwell. If you have someone who's not on the list, please say their name to yourself or out loud when we get to that point in the prayer. If you want them added to the list permanently, or hopefully not permanently, please God they should recover, just let us know and we'll add them. Yes, Chaim Tobi David ben Chayaleah. Yes, Avram Shrag ben Sora Tavora. Yes, Bok Shimon ben Fredo. Yes, Pesach ben Shane Gita. Yes, Shavzam ben Chanaliba. Yes, Moshe Gershon ben Feiga. Yes, Yeshua ben Miriam. Yes, Shlomo ben Midol. Yes, Avram ben Sora Pero. Yes, Moshe ben Melech ben Masha Feiga. Yes, Mordechai David ben Cyril. Yes, Yaakov ben Miriam. Yes, Michal ben Henya. Yes, Yonatan ben Sora. Yes, Svi ben Sora. Yes, Cassio ben Fredo. Yes, Pinchas ben Liba. Yes, Yitzhak ben Rosachaya, yes, Baruch ben Tovachaya, yes, Yudachai ben Esther Bracha, yes, Reuven ben Nechama Esther, yes, Yehuda ben Kayla, yes, Rufal Hersh, Yehuda ben Chana, yes, Yimir ben Sarv, yes, Baruch ben Polin, yes, Yitzhak Isaac ben Yudis Rachel, yes, Nosam ben Shanam, yes, Mary ben Malk, yes, David ben Tova, yes, Moshe ben Shifra Rachel, yes, Malcolm Bas Chan, yes, Esther Chana Bas Tavora, yes, Esther Bas Rocha, yes, Hershel Bas Rocha, yes, Francis Bas Hershel, yes, Leah Bas Kem, yes, Yael Bas Rocha, yes, Tavora Bas Gittel, yes, Sima Masha Bas Yachve, Shlomo Bas Chaya Liba, yes, Tavora Bas Sora Liba, yes, Gali Bas Sora, yes, Yudis Bas Beila, yes, Leah Bas Ezel, yes, Brocha Bas Feiga, yes, Michal David Ben Rivka, yes, Shengel Bas Sora, Bavushim Natzlaka Bavaram, Bis Chazek Shmochim Alchem Aleim, Nachim Apesem, Nachazich Amach Yosam, Bishlach lahem meher for shlema chalem chalgidem so shechol yisrof nefesh v'zagov hashtamag lavizon karev v'noima amen. Wish long life to those of the outside in the coming week. On Shabbat, Cyril Barry for his father, Paul Chanaga for his father, Lawrence Cohen for his father, Cheryl Lawrence for her father. On Sunday, Brian Cole for his father, Renee Wallen for her father, and Marilyn Widgodski for her father. On Monday, Barbara Breen for her father, Reva Cohen for her father. On Tuesday, Betty Freeman for her husband, Joyce Rosen for her husband, and E. Schwartz for his mother. On Wednesday, Stanley Barron for his father, Rosalind Cohen for her father, Jeffrey Frankel for his father, Ian Napper for his father, David Newman for his mother, and Murray Rich for his mother. On Thursday, Ori Cohen for his father, Arlene Klein for her father, Joe Patrick for his sister, and Raymond Shapiro for his mother. And on Friday, Katie Glyer for her father, Lauren Topham for his father, Gillian Ollie for her father, Solly Saw for his mother, Belinda Taylor for her brother. Wish everyone long life. Chaim Aruchim. El Malachamim, Sheikhei Bamba Roimim, Hamatzei Milchan Chayna, Tachas Kavei Ashchina, V'ma'alois Kaveshim Tum, Gazorkim Asim Rimes Nishmas, Moshe Uvadia ben Avrom, yes, ben Moshe, yes, Chaim ben Avrom, yes, Leish ben Feivel, yes, Avram Michal, yes, Pesach ben Dovid, yes, Chanabas Yishayah Leib, yes, Moshe ben Avrom, yes, Meir Simcha ben Moshe, Vishmol ben Chaim, yes, Leivash Moshe Tzvi, yes, Shimon ben Eliyahu Cohen, yes, Roizel Bas, Shalom Zalman Shoel, yes, Esther Bas Chaya Hirsch, yes, Hershel Avram ben Lepka, yes, Meir ben Reb Volvo, Bet Zeb Wolf, Veshlam Bas Moshe, Leivash Shlomo, Shalchol Olam Ma'amar Bachamim, Aserim B'Sei Second Vav Yoilamim, Yitov B'Tzacham Yisishmas, Avad Noi Nachal Asam, Yanuch B'Shalom Mishkavay Sam, V'Naimar, Amen. And now for this week's sermon. The old joke, which I've told before, disclaimer now, about the couple who were travelling home one night in the car. Police officer pulls them over and he says to the husband, excuse me sir, but did you realise you're doing 50 miles an hour? This is a 40-mile-an-hour limit. And the gentleman says, I'm sorry officer, my speedometer doesn't always work properly, it gets stuck. I'm so sorry, I have no idea. And the wife says, yes you did, your radar detector started beeping. And the man glares at his wife, the officer writes out an on-the-spot fine. He says, also, sir, I notice you're not wearing your seatbelt. And the guy says, yes, well, I took off my belt when you stopped me and pulled me over so I could get my documents out of the glove box. And the wife says, darling, you never wear your belt. Everybody knows that. Another ticket. Now he's really looking daggers at his wife. And the officer says, also, sir, your right hand brake light isn't working. He says, oh, I had no idea. She says, I told you last week to get that fixed. You never listened to me. And now the guy can't take it anymore. He turns to his wife and says, you silly woman, can you please be quiet? Just shut up. And the officer says, oh, as he's writing a ticket for the brake light, madam, does your husband always talk to you so rudely? She says, no, only when he's drunk. Okay, disclaimer, I do not approve of drink driving. It's just a joke. When you go on a journey, make sure you take the right people with you. That's the moral of that story. This week's Sedra is all about journeys. It's about the 42 journeys, Masei. It's a long Sedra. The 42 journeys that the children of Israel took from Egypt to the Promised Land. And this is one of my favourite ideas that I probably mention at least once a year. And I mentioned at least twice in the past week. So if you've heard it, I apologise, but worth repeating. The Torah does not waste words. We're told that very often. Something as fundamental as milk and meat. Lo tavashel gadi b'chalev imo. 5 words in the Torah, 5 words in the Bible, from which we learn hundreds of laws about our kosher kitchens. And yet it's just 5 words in the Torah. It's very succinct. It's very cryptic. Don't cook a kid in its mother's milk. And yet when the Torah wants to tell us the children of Israel journeyed from Egypt into the Promised Land, it doesn't do the obvious thing. The obvious thing would be to say the children of Israel left Egypt through miracles from God, and after 40 years in the desert, they passed through some places, and they ended up in the Promised Land, and that's the next chapter of their story. That's not what the Torah does. The Torah tells us they journeyed from here to there. There's a special tune even when we read it. And they journeyed from there to another place. And each place is named twice. They went from A to B. They went from B to C. They went from C to D. 42 times. It's about a column of text in the Torah. There's 248 columns. And one of them at least is devoted to these journeys. Why? Who cares? You know, if you go from A to B, we're in London currently. If you take a train to Manchester, you may well pass through Birmingham. Okay? At the time, it's very nice. You think, oh, Birmingham, that's nice. I studied in Birmingham. By the time you get to Manchester, do you really care which places you pass through on the way? You know, if you're trying to navigate somewhere, sure, you'll say, oh, turn right at the
football ground, turn left at Tesco. But once you get to your destination, does it really matter? Who cares? Who remembers the places along the way? The Torah seems to want us to know that actually you do need to remember the places along the way. Here's my take on it. The reason the Torah uses so many words and column inches, quite literally, to tell us every single journey that the children of Israel took, even though once they get to the promised land, supposedly you will think it's all irrelevant, is to teach us a very simple, very profound lesson. That we take many journeys in life. There are many stages in our life's journey. And each one of them is important in and of itself. The journey is important. That leg is important. The people who join us, going back to the joke, are important. The people who join us on each step of our journey. And just because you get to the promised land, or the next step of the 42 journeys, life, the universe and everything, right? If you're a Hitchhiker's Guide fan. Just because you get to the next stage does not negate the previous one. And the Torah proves that by listing them in absolute detail. You know, people who shaped your childhood, people who shaped your school career, your further education or your yeshiva studies, people who influenced you when you were young, when you were first married, or as you got older, people who took journeys with you, maybe in a previous job or a previous community if you're a rabbi, or your childhood, or when you lived in Israel for a bit, or when you lived here or there, or your old job. It's easy to forget them. How often do we lose touch with people? People who are a big part of our lives. But we lose touch. Why? Because it's in the past. No, says the Torah, that's not true. Every journey is precious. Every journey is worth recording in detail. And the people who come with you on that journey are precious. Don't forget them just because you've moved on to the next journey. And it seems very pertinent to our times. We've been on a roller coaster journey the last few months. Our schools closed. Our community ravaged by tragedy. People ill. People unable to see their loved ones. People dying of terrible disease. And it's been a real roller coaster of emotions, of feelings, of experiences, of change, of paradigm shift. From going to shul every day or every week or every month to doing everything at home. From going to community events and social events and educational events to having to do everything at home, not seeing our loved ones for Seder night or for Friday night dinner, our children being home from school, everything different. It's been a journey. And often, I'm sure like many rabbis in my sermons, I've emphasized the silver linings of this journey. We have more time at home, we have more time for reflection. Our religion is not just some organized thing that we do in shul with the rabbi, it's something we have to put our own efforts into. It's more individual, it's more personal. There's all of that. People caring more for each other, getting to know their neighbours, volunteering, supporting community, realising what's really precious and valuable is not a Premier League football player, but it's a key worker on the front lines, appreciating those key workers more, appreciating what we have, thanking God for our blessings, being less materialistic. There's so much that we've gained from this. It's been a journey. It's been a difficult one, but it's been a journey. And now the next stage is starting to happen. For those, and I emphasize for those well enough, or those feeling safe enough, because many of us will still stay home. But for those of us going out, our shuls are opening up. Our schools are planning to open from September. Shops are opening up, hairdressers, all kinds of things. It would be very easy to go back to the way things were. It's a new step in the journey. The shul reopens. Okay, you have to wear a mask. You have to stay 2 meters apart. That's part of this journey. The challenge is not to forget the last leg. The last leg was lockdown, being home, all the things that we learned from that journey, from that experience. How do we make sure that we retain those and we retain the best of them as we embark on the next stage? How do we make sure we don't just go back to how everything was, but we take on board the positives and the lessons learned? And one way is by remembering that every journey is important. Not forgetting the 3 months, 4 months we just spent at home in lockdown, and some of us are still spending. Not to forget what we learned and gained from that. Not to have short memories and just hark back to the good old days. Because everything has changed and everything will continue to change. It's how we take those experiences and capitalize on them and capture them that is going to be our challenge in the coming weeks and months ahead. How do we make sure that the lessons learned, the journey taken, is not a waste, is not just consigned to history? And how do we take all those positives and keep them going even as we return to some kind of normality? And that is the challenge. And the Torah tells us, start by recognizing every journey, every step, the people that went with you along the way. And so I say to all of us as well, There are people who have been on this journey with us through lockdown. There are people who will now be on the journey with us as we emerge from lockdown. People we haven't seen for months. We'll see in person again, including beloved family members. There'll be people we still can't see, or unfortunately no longer with us. There'll be all kinds of different people and experiences and places that have accompanied us on our journey. Don't forget them. As we return to quote-unquote normal, whatever that is, as we reach our destination or perhaps closer, don't forget the previous steps. And the same for life in general. Don't forget the people who shaped your journey to who you are today. Don't forget where you come from. Don't forget your roots, your teachers, your parents, your family, your old friends from school, the people who influenced you and inspired you. Just because it was years ago doesn't make it any less important. And that's what the Torah tells us. And so it's not a waste of words at all. Because the Torah wants us to know that every journey is important, every step is important. And as we journey back to some kind of normality and back to our shores, let's remember that the previous journey we just took, that difficult and arduous one, is not to be forgotten. And the lessons learned and the people who supported us are not to be forgotten either. May we all merit to remember and cherish every stage in our lives, the difficult ones, the easy ones, and the people who help us on those stages, and not to forget them, and to learn from them and grow from them. I wish everyone Shabbat Shalom.